Welcome to The Passion Pod with your host, Chris Johnson. Thanks for joining us. Now sit back, relax, and enjoy the feature presentation.
Season 6, Episode 1.
Welcome back, friends. Today we traveled to Hollywood, California to meet up with a so-called funny lady, which I just met her and she's actually pretty funny. Our guest today has her own podcast called Kral Space and has made a living off of comedy, even though she started with acting, so we'll get to how she did that. Welcome to the show, Kym Kral.
Hi, thank you for having me.
Oh
I love
God.
so-called funny. Thanks.
Yeah, I'm not sure if you're funny yet. Well, no, I can tell you're funny now, but I didn't really watch too many of your like actual comedy things. I was just kind of like listening through the podcast and chuckling a little bit, but I'm like, this isn't like a comedy set. So I'm like, well, apparently she's been doing this for a while. She must be hilarious. Or at least a lot of people must think you're super hilarious. So
I think so. I also, I took down all of my stand-up clips off of YouTube.
Why?
Well, because they tell you when you're now I'm at the point where I'm funnier than I was when most of those clips were up. So like if I try to book something and then they Google me and then they see a thing I did in like 2013 where I was okay, right? No one's funny when they first start out.
Right.
So it's just like take everything down, and then it's also now behind a paywall of for my podcast. So.
Oh, sure. Yeah, I mean, well, so we got linked up because of our mutual friend Wayne Hoffman. So shout out to him. He's the man.
Hi, Wayne.
Yeah, dude, Wayne's so cool.
I love Wayne Hoffman. Magic's real, guys. It's real.
Oh my! yeah,
did he do stuff for you?
I should have asked, and I didn't. I know I was at his house, and I didn't ask at all. Anyway, so on the show, he was talking about like sizzle reels, right? And that's like the same thing you're talking about. It's like when you want. I try to tell people this, like, don't put out stuff that isn't the best of your ability. And I agree. Like when something that's up isn't the best to your current ability, sometimes it's like makes more sense to wash that away because the first thing people see of you, you want to be like the best. Right? Yeah. Well, anyways, so getting back to it, who are you besides your name and what are you passionate about?
Who am I? Okay. Well, I'm Kym Kral. I know you said beside your name, but I can't start that out without saying my name. I'm originally from Denver. I moved out here to be an actress years ago, and I do that still, but I found comedy, so I'm a stand-up comic. God, it's so funny when people are like, who are you? What are you passionate about? What I'm passionate about, I want to tell a lot of stories, and I want to help people with those stories. I had a traumatic childhood that I found that, and that's what I talk about a lot on my show. I'm sure you listen to that. I talk a lot about that, and I want to make people feel less alone about the shit they've been through, Yeah. And I want to make people laugh, and I want to make a ton of money doing it. I know that's really when people are like, oh my God, did you just say you want to make a ton of money? Yeah, I do. Like, think about it. If everyone you knew made a lot of money, we could turn this whole thing around. Like, horrible people make a lot of money, but if a lot of really good people made a lot of money, we could, save the world. And I want to do that.
Oh, absolutely. Well, money is just like another resource, right? If you have more of that resource, like you don't have to selfishly only use it for yourself, right?
Yeah.
If you just make more money, you can then put it into your schools or you put it into this or that or whatever. It kind of blows my mind, the amount of money. It's weird coming out here because I'm from such a small town where like I have a pretty nice house and I own a little skateboard shop. Like here, even if you make six figures, you have roommates. It's mind blowing, like the difference, right? And people here will just like throw so much money away on like anything because money's just like different here versus back home. I'm like, dude, for what you just spent on your meal, you could have donated $100 to your school and they would have been stoked.
Yeah.
Like, but you just like don't even think about how you could be doing those types of things. Like, how could you make your money do the most, like have the most impact? And I feel like people don't think about that too much out here because it's such a crazy rat race. But yeah, such
a crazy rat race.
Yeah, it's totally different here. How can people best follow you and get in touch if they wanted to hit up Kym?
Instagram. I'm on Instagram a lot. I'm trying to do TikTok. Guys, I'm not good at TikTok. I don't know. I started waxing my body.
I saw that.
Did you see that? Yeah. There's a company that wants to sponsor me, but it's like sort of a weird situation where they're like, here's $25. And I'm like, so are you sponsoring me or am I making these weird? So it's, if you want to look me up on TikTok, you can see how I wax my armpits. But Instagram is more where I'm at. It's Kym Kral, KYMKRAL. And I have everything on there for that. So
perfect. Yeah, TikTok. We were just talking about Clubhouse too. And I'm skeptical on whether or not TikTok's going to be around long term, but I've talked to people that are big on TikTok and they're like, no, this is here to stay. I'm like, well, I don't know. I'm not. It depends on the person, right? Like
I have friends that have millions of followers now.
Oh, totally.
Who had none before the pandemic.
Yeah. I have one friend with like 300K and another friend with over 1 million who are on season 5, and but like they have these huge followings, but like money doesn't really flow through. So I'm like, why are you putting so much energy specifically into that platform when it's not going to translate into income? Because at some point you're going to get like burnt out on creating just for the sake of creating, right?
Yeah.
Unless you're doing something like painting or something where it's like you're by yourself. Well, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe these people just love doing TikTok forever. But I've been trying to encourage those friends of mine, like, dude, try to move your people to something like Instagram. Like I've been trying to move people there. Anyways.
Yeah, TikTok is, I have a buddy who's starting to make money on TikTok. And I was like, oh, sweet. Like he has millions of likes. And I'm like, oh my God, how much are you making? He's like, $1,200. I'm like a week, a day? Like what? And he's like, in the 5 months I've been doing it, I've made $1,200.
Yeah.
And I'm like, oh, you said you spend 15 hours a day doing this.
Yeah.
That's wild, dude.
Yeah. I mean, it's good coverage, but really the only reason it would matter for the coverage or like the exposure in that way is if you're able to translate that to actual money or to a different platform or to whatever. If you can get those followers to then take action to help you in some kind of way. But a lot of people don't. Anyway, So growing up, you said you're from Denver. Were you actually in the city, Denver? No. You're like some smaller town. Okay. So growing up, you must have wanted to be an actress that whole time since you were like a little kid.
Oh, yeah. Right? I wanted to be an actress the whole time. And it's funny, I write now and I never thought, I didn't know stand-up comedy was a thing. I didn't know that I just knew actors were a thing. I didn't think oh, there's a writer and a director, but I would write these little plays for my cousins and I wrote an entire 2-man show, rewrote Tombstone and made my male cousin, dress up in a trench coat and a cowboy hat while we told the story. I was Wyatt Earp and he was Doc Holliday. And I was 10 and I wrote this and my whole family was just and then I rewrote Grease so 4 people can do it. I kicked my little cousin out into the living room in her underwear at 10 and made her sing Look at Me, I'm Sandra Dee. And we're in the hallway. She's I don't want to do this. I'm we are doing this. And she's and I kicked her out in the hallway or in the living room.
You didn't even play Sandy?
I played Sandy. Look at Me, I'm Sandra Dee was Rizzo. So of course was Sandy. And then I made my other cousins sit on great. So yeah, I've always wanted to be an actor.
Did you do acting in high school? Were you a drama kid?
No.
No, did it just disappear during that time frame? Were you way too cool for it? Did you just suck at acting?
I wasn't cool. I wasn't okay. So I wanted to be a cheerleader, and the reason why I'm not ashamed of that, it's just I'm horrified if any of that stuff ever comes out. I was so bad. I was so skinny. Like my hands, you can see my hands are pretty big. They've always been this size, but I was 5'8" and weighed 80 pounds. So I was just so awkward and weird. I was missing the better part of my teeth, and I wanted to be a cheerleader. So I made it freshman year. I don't think the competition was too hard because our team was really bad. But then I was I wasn't popular, but I was in an acting class. And you know how it's so divided in schools, theater kids and cheerleader, jocks?
Yeah, totally.
So the theater kids didn't like me. They didn't not like me, but they were skeptical about me.
You weren't part of the group.
Yeah, you're not a real theater kid because you're wearing a cheerleading costume 3 days a week or whatever.
Right.
And then the jock girls were I'm now as an adult, I'm friends with most of them on Facebook. They're all very kind. They were just all so pretty and popular, and I was just so none of those things. And so I would be in drama class, and then I was a cheerleader. And then senior year, I was I'm going to finally do the plays. And then I did the plays, and I wasn't a cheerleader. And so, yeah, that was that. And it was fine. I don't know. The theater kids, it's so funny. I went to college, and I was a theater kid too, but I just never have been one of those. And then I moved out to LA, and I'm oh, so that's how all of actors are, just the high school theater kids.
Crazy. So what'd you do? This blows my mind because you come from a smaller town or, whatever.
It's a suburb of Denver, by the way. It's not a small town. It's it's Littleton, Colorado. So it's the first mass shooting was there. So like I usually just say Denver because then that like people are like, oh, that people have a lot of questions about Littleton. So that's fine.
Sure. Well, okay. So I'm in Eau Claire, Wisconsin, which is kind of a suburb of Minneapolis, which it isn't, but whatever. But I'm trying to like picture my own self, and I'm like, okay, well, at 18, what did I do? I went to college for a year for business, and I dropped out because I'm like, I can sell people stuff. I don't know why I'm going to school for this.
Yeah.
And then I did different sales jobs, sales management jobs. Opened my store when I was 23, and I was just like, hometown, like I'm like the biggest townie I can think of. Like I literally own the house I grew up in that my parents bought when I was 2. Like my kids climb the same trees that I used to climb and shit. Like it's nuts. So I'm a super townie, but I'm trying to imagine myself when I was 19 being like, well, I'm just gonna move to LA. Like what was that even like? Did you just sleep in a closet with somebody? Like, did you line up a job ahead of time that actually paid enough? Because like to me, it seems like it's almost impossible for somebody to just like come here and live anywhere but a couch.
I mean, there's a couple, like one, I have this guy that I worked with when I first moved here. People like, I look dumb. Like there's no other way to put it. I look dumb. Like I'm not dumb, but I call it resting deer in the headlights look. Like my eyes are like super Bambi. So, and it took me years to understand that because I'm like, people overly explain everything to me. And then I realized, I was like, oh, because you look like you don't understand. And I'm not. So I was sitting with this guy. I worked at this like sketchy phone room when I first moved here. And this guy who'd seen my apartment, this other guy was like, we were talking and he goes, wow, you're like not dumb. And I'm so used to people saying that to me that I was just like, oh, and at the time I was 21. So it was just like, okay. And then the guy was like, yeah, this girl has survival skills that that would blow your mind. And so I too went to college and then I dropped out the end of my sophomore year. And my best friend at the time, who's still a dear friend of mine, but she was like, we're going to move to LA. And so she moved to LA first and she was like, oh my God, all you need to do is just like, you don't have to be good at acting. You just have to like walk around and someone will discover you. And God bless her. She's wonderful. She lives in Wisconsin now with her husband and 2 boys. We had very different ideas of like what we would do here. And so she came out here first and then I moved and lived with my dad for a little bit before I moved out here. And,
Wait, your dad was here?
no, my dad was in Denver or Littleton. But
so who'd you move in with
I moved in with him for the summer to save up to move to LA, right?
Okay.
And this is such a up story. This is such a sketchy, like definitely a mirror of my whole childhood, right? So I come home from school or from work one day and I'm saving up money and he had gotten me this car that would just keep breaking down. He sold my good car that was never breaking down because he was like, that'll never make it to LA. And then he's like, I'm going to get you a new car. And I was like, sweet. And then I come home and there's a 1991 Mercury Sable in our driveway.
Oh, no.
And I'm like, what the hell is that? He's like, it's your new car. And I'm like, where's my actual newer car? He's like, that's not going to make it. So that thing broke down all the time, right? And so we're my childhood home. He owned his own business at the time. And I come home from work one day and he looks up from his like TV and scotch like he always did, right in the middle of the day. And he's like, hey, I'm going to lose the house. I'm filing for bankruptcy and I don't really want you to be here for that. So I'm going to give you $5,000 and we're going to move you out to LA in 2 weeks. Cool? And I was like, what? He's like, well, I don't want you to not give 2 weeks to your job. I was working some sketchy phone room again. Like I've worked way too many sketchy phone rooms. And I was like, who cares? Most of the people in my office have like parole ankle bracelets or whatever. They're like, no one, but he's like, I don't feel good about you not. And then we're going to move out to LA. And so we like packed up we packed up my Mercury Sable and then we packed up a U-Haul that he was going to drive out here separately. So we drove out here, took us like 2 or 3 days because we got a blowout in Utah on a Sunday. So nothing was open. And so we get here and then we get a hotel and then he's like, well, let's find you an apartment. And this man, we find an apartment on the beach that we're sharing, that I would be sharing with an adult man, like a 50-year-old man. And it's a 1-bedroom apartment. And this guy, he had flaming hot Cheetos all over him. Like he was eating them. So they were all over his pants and his face. And my dad's like, this is reasonable. And I'm like, there's only 1 bathroom and you said it's a private bathroom. The guy's like, yeah, I go to the bathroom at the Y. I'm like, well, where do you sleep? He's like, I sleep on the couch. And I'm like, well, what do you have to go to the bathroom in the middle of the night? He's like, I don't have to go to the bathroom. And I was like, can I put a lock on my door? And he's like, absolutely not. And my dad was like, cool, this seems reasonable. We'll come back tomorrow and we'll pay you the deposit or whatever. And we walk out and I had to explain to my dad, that guy's gonna murder me in my sleep. Like that guy's gonna keep me as his prisoner. And my dad was like, oh, I guess I didn't think of that. And I'm like, so then we found a one room. Yeah, he died, so it's fine.
Okay.
Sorry. Dead dad jokes will come. Sorry, everybody. Warning to listeners. And so we found this one room studio apartment, bachelor. I had like a hot plate, and we shared a kitchen in this like right next to UCLA. And I paid $800 a month for that when I first moved out here.
Whoa.
Yeah. So, and I found a job at some sketchy phone room, which was like a bunch of has-beens and wannabes. My boss was, I don't know if you've ever seen this movie, Porky's.
No.
Okay. It's like the American Pie of the 70s.
Okay.
My boss was Pee-wee. Some of your listeners might know who this is, but like Pee-wee was like the Stifler of, and so he was like, I mean, he was a star and he was going to make it and it was going to be a big deal. But then he now runs this phone room. So it was like a room full of people like that who like had promising careers. And then people like me who just like got off the bus. It was such a.
Sure.
And then when I finally left that job, everybody was like, how did you get out? I'm like, there's like a whole thing on Craigslist where you can just find another job. You don't have to stay here. Why are like, it was like prison. It literally was like,
right.
So I just struggled, like I just got a small apartment. And then I finally moved into, my buddy at this job was like, you're paying way too much. You should go on Craigslist and get a roommate. And I found this guy on Craigslist who it was in Santa Monica. This guy's one of my best friends now. He's one of my best friends in the world. It's hilarious that we met on Craigslist. And so he owned this condo and they were showing it to a bunch of people. So I was walking around with this other girl and they were like, there was another girl there that was going to be the roommate. And we're in the gym and he's like, so do you guys have a lot of like overnight guests? Are you partiers? And I was like, I don't have a lot of overnight guests. I mean, I have guests, but I don't let them spend the night. You know what I mean? And I looked at the girl and I like went to high five her and she was like, no. And then I left and I was like, I'm probably not going to live in that apartment. I should reel it back. And then Ali looked at the roommate at the time and was like, that girl is either going to be the best idea or the worst idea we've ever had. And she's moving in. And so I lived there for years. So you don't have to this is different now. This was like 15 years ago. So you don't have to. Did that answer your question? I go off on a lot of tangents.
Yeah, basically. I mean, I get why people are on the grind and hustle all the time here because it's like, it's pretty hard to have like I think about my situation. Like I said, I own just like a little skateboard shop,
Mm-hmm.
and like I say that like it's a real business. I make money and stuff, whatever.
It's cool. You should be more proud of that.
Yeah, no, I'm definitely still
prouder. Yeah.
But like I own a house. I have like half an acre of land and I'm like in the city, you know what I mean? And I have this kind of lifestyle with my children and everything that I can afford. And I think about it and I'm like, that's like not possible here. Like, you just can't, you know what I mean? So it makes sense why everybody here is like 30, not even thinking about kids yet and just like working all the time.
Yeah.
And like for me, it's great to fly in because I'm like, oh, everyone's hustling. I love to like grind and work on stuff. So I'm like, I can come out here, hammer out a bunch of work and then go back home where everything's quiet. And I'm like, I'm back in my serene space. I don't know if you like houseplants, but I'm like stupid obsessed with them.
I have so many plants.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
Okay. I'll show you later what my dining room looks like where I like work from my laptop and you'll be like, oh my God, you can meditate there. And I'm like, yeah. Yeah, you definitely can. It's like, dude, totally different. How did you get your first acting job? Like, what was the first acting things that you did when you came out here? Because you never did like a paid acting job in Denver, right?
No.
Okay, so you came out here. Did you just like find an agency and send them a headshot and whatever? Like, how'd that work?
Actually, so there was a woman there. My first job ever, I'll tell you about. But there was a woman that had this like hole in the wall. Now she's like a coach, an acting coach of some kind. Like she's blown up. But she used to Dallas Travers used to have this like hole in the wall office, and it was so long ago that we didn't really have internet. Like there was internet, but it was like you got dial up, or it was like $90 for broadband or something like that, right?
Right.
And so you would pay her $50 a month. And she would take your paper headshots, like your hard copy headshots, and mail them to all of the places that were looking for like roles and like from Backstage West, which is like now I think online. I have no idea. And so that was like where I was first got my like first like auditions. My first job is not an acting job, but it was an acting job. I have been on a lot of reality television. One may say I'm like a Z-list reality star, like a way not really a star, but I've been on a lot of them where I've been recognized in public for this. I was on, do you remember Blind Date?
No, was this like an MTV like Next type thing, or what
It was like it was on UPN, Roger Lodge. It was like the original dating show. Maybe not the original like from like the 70s, but the original modern one. Okay. And so you go on a blind date with someone and they film it. And so I didn't think it was that big of a deal. I didn't even really want to do it. I got in my first car accident the day of the audition. Like it was like, but then I went back to my little phone room, and this woman who was one of the has-beens, she's a lovely lady. If she's listening, you're lovely. But at the time she was, in the phone room with me, and she was on Seinfeld. And so she was like, had a career. And so I was like, yeah, I guess I'm going to be on Blind Date. And she's like, Kimmy, that's your first job. I'm like, she was like, this is so exciting. You're going to be on TV. It was horrible. It was a nightmare. And like, so like they tell you when you show up, they're like, we want you to be as authentic as you possibly can. Like if you're going to walk out, this is the one where everyone would walk out and there was a hot tub.
Okay.
Ring a bell yet? No? Okay. So they're like, don't talk. You can talk to the guy about topical stuff when the cameras are off, like baseball, like things that we can't air, but don't talk about stuff that we can air, right?
Right.
The guy was kind of cool off air, but like, so we meet and he's like, I'm Adam. I'll never forget this. He's like, I'm Adam. I'm like, nice to meet you, dude. And then we like start to walk. So the camera's off and the camera guy goes, hey man, what was your name again? And he goes, I'm Todd. And I was like, he said his name was Adam, right? So the cameras come back on and I go, your name's Adam? And he goes, yeah. And I'm like, well, you just said your name was Todd. And he goes, yeah, Adam's a good guy. And I was like, are you just speaking generally Adams are good guys? Or like, are you talking in the third person? Like, I don't. And then he shows me a tattoo that has an ATQ. And he's like, Adam Todd Quantum. And I'm like, oh God, it's going to be a really long day, isn't it? And then we got stuck in traffic. And I almost got, like, he got awful. Like, he was just like, oh yeah, this yoga instructor a couple of days ago, and like just like really gross, swarmy. And the camera sound guy was like, I thought you were going to get out on the middle of like Wilshire Boulevard and just start walking. So we get to dinner and the producer's in the bathroom with me while I'm like changing. And she's like, he's awful. We know. You're really normal and sweet. So we needed good TV. So we had to pick a bad guy. So if you would stick with through dinner and then you can leave after dinner, that'd be great, but do whatever you need to do. Halfway through dinner, he was just being really gross. And then he's like, I don't even know why you're here. And I was like, yeah, dude, I don't either. And then I just like got up and left. And then that was my first acting job. I'm using air quotes.
Wow. So I need like an autograph from you because you're super famous right from then. Right
from then. Oh, it was horrible. I had this boyfriend months later that we watched it when it aired. And like all of his roommates who I had dated my way through that house, and then the final guy was my boyfriend. So all these guys like kind of hated me. Yeah. And my boyfriend was like, you're the only woman I know that would walk into a house like this of all dudes that she has like had some sort of relationship with and not give up. And I was like, well, I don't. It didn't work out. It's working out with you, whatever. But those guys hated me, and I had to watch this horrible experience with all of them. And it was just like, oh God, someone recently found it. It's being aired somewhere. I don't know where, on some game show network, and someone recently sent it to me, and I was like, he goes, you got a lot prettier. I'm like, thank you, I guess. I was like blonde and very pale. I just wasn't Hollywood yet, I guess. I don't know.
Oh yeah, I don't know. I've seen some Hollywood. I don't know that makes you prettier. But anyways, so you did some not great dating shows. When was the first time somebody recognized you in public? And you said that happens to you relatively often at this point. Is that just like incredibly awkward? What?
It's mostly for dating shows. If I'm very candid with you, it is that I am recognized for these dopey shows that
everyone comes up and says, "How was Adam?" Is that like how they?
Oh, no one recognized me from Blind Date. Thank God. I did run into Adam like 6 months later at Saddle Ranch, which is like a douchey cowboy bar in Hollywood. And he came up to me and he's like, hey, and it was my 22nd birthday or something like that. And I was like, boo. And they like flipped off his cowboy hat. And he's like, I'm not really a loser. I was just trying to make good TV. And I was like, nah, dude, we're good. But I never got recognized for Blind Date. The first time I got recognized was for Millionaire Matchmaker.
Oh, wait, was that the one where like all these girls are trying to date a millionaire?
Yeah.
Oh no.
And it's not at all like I don't think I signed anything, and this is a long time ago, so I don't know if this is too much if I'm gonna get sued. But it's not at all the way it's portrayed, right? I show up for the audition. And the woman's there, like Patty's there. And like, so you walk in and you're like, oh, it's like literally, like, as most auditions like that, like American Idol, you go through a huge screening process before you actually meet Simon Cowell. I don't think he's on that anymore. I don't know American Idol.
Yeah, he's on the Voice or something. I don't know.
America's
he's on some
Got
other
Talent.
One.
Yeah, whatever. But
Yeah.
so there's a huge screening process usually before you meet like the judges.
Right.
And we walked into this like weird random building in Santa Monica, and 3 of us walked in, and there was Patty and her 2 assistants. And what's wild, if you know the show, the woman that is the tatted up woman is stunning in real life. TV, she doesn't look great on TV. That may sound mean, I don't know. But like in real life, you're like, holy, you're so attractive. And so you walk in and she does the thing she does on the show. If you've ever seen it, like she like tells you what she critiques why you're single and why you need to date a millionaire. She liked me. She was like, you're adorable. I was really tall and I had heels on, or I am really tall and I had heels on. And she goes, you're adorable. Show up here on Wednesday. You're going to meet the millionaire, but don't wear heels because you're too tall. And I was like, all right. So then it was actually down the street from here there's a club, the Hemingway or something. I don't know. But it was at that club. And I show up and there's a girl that I did another reality show with that was there. And they were like, so basically you're going to meet the millionaire and you're going to be able to drink all day for free. But we don't pay you unless the millionaire picks you. And this girl were like, should we do this? But we hadn't seen each other in so long that we were like, well, we would just be hanging out at a bar after this anyway. So let's just be on the show and hang out and get drinks for free.
Sure.
And so I got recognized for that a lot. And the only thing she said to me I had sandals on, like nice sandals on, but she was like, why wouldn't you wear heels to this? This is a first date. And I was like, you told me not to wear heels. I'm tall. And then, that was the first time I got recognized. And it was embarrassing. It was very embarrassing.
Dang. Yeah, I feel like that's not what you want
No.
to be recognized. And I'm gonna throw this out just as a male perspective, and mine may be different than everybody else's. I don't like heels. Sorry. Like, I don't prefer women in heels ever. I know that's like this is what you wear. I don't like that. I think the majority of men prefer women to be shorter than them to a certain degree. Yeah. And I don't know that that's a blanket statement that dudes prefer women in heels on a first date, because I don't. But that's unrelated. That's just my random
all of her
thought.
Stuff was like, okay, I'm not. I mean, I guess I'm now, what is it, like 10 years later and I'm still single. So maybe I should have listened to all the stuff she said, but I'm.
So, okay, so you did a bunch of reality shows. Did you do any like serious roles before comedy came in? I know. Okay,
No.
you can just tell kind of the story of like how did you switch from reality shows to stand-up comedy?
Okay, so I worked in that sketchy phone room. And I was sitting next to this guy that became like a buddy of mine. He was in his 40s. I was like 20 something. And he was one of those people that you recognize, right? Like he's been in everything. He was in Road to Perdition. He was in Instinct with Anthony Hopkins. And so he always gave me some like industry advice, right? He was always like talking to me, and he had a kid. So he had, in between jobs, he had to work this phone room. And that's another thing about this industry that like, people don't know outside of Hollywood. We all have a billion side jobs. Even if we're making money at what we want to do, until you pop. Kesha said the first time she heard her song, Kesha, forgive me for bringing up that pop culture reference, but she said the first time she heard her song, she was in the dollar store buying dinner that she could barely afford, and she heard her song on the radio. And then, so it's just such a weird industry, but like, so we're sitting next to each other, and he was like, look, I don't do this for a lot of people. I don't talk business, especially in this kind of environment, because everyone's so thirsty. But he's like, you're funny. Like, he's like, you are hilarious. I think you should go do improv. I think you should go to UCB, which is an improv school here. And he's like, I think you should go to UCB and take classes. And like, I think that's your avenue. And then I sat on it for a couple of years because it's scary, and, you get in your groove. And that's another thing about this town is you get in your groove of like, I bartend, and, I sometimes go to auditions or whatever, like you never. And so I finally went to UCB, terrible improver. I'm not a good improver at all. It's just a game. I don't know if you've ever watched improv. Like you actually have to, there's like a game or something that you have to do. I don't know.
Yeah, like whose line is it anyway?
Yeah, and I'm not good at that. Like I'm good at on my feet. I'm very witty, but like once they put the game and the rules, I like froze. I was terrible at it, right? And in improv, it's like the lights go out and then two people walk up front and they're supposed to improv together. I was the person that everybody was like, oh, because it was like, you're going to have to carry this scene because I'm not good at this. I just froze, but I was really good at the story. Like, so how this particular thing went, we had this graduation show and the audience would say a word and then one member would just come up and tell a story about that word and then we'd act it out. And I was really good at that. So I went up, I did the word, and then this is a really dumb but proud moment in my career. After the show, I didn't do well in any of the improv. And a lot of people were like, oh my God, this is your calling. This is exactly what you should do. And I'm like, do you mean this first part, the story part? Because the improv, I think I said 4 words in the 2-hour improv. I'm so bad at it. And Jonathan from Buffy, the Vampire Slayer, Danny Strong, I'm a uncomfortably big Buffy fan, walks up to me and he was in the audience and he was like, you are so funny. And I was like, oh my God. Like 16-year-old Kym was like, like I was like, be cool, Kral, be cool. And then I was like, all right, well, I'm not good at improv, but I'm good at this story. And I was kind of a comedy groupie when I first moved out here. Because as I said, I didn't know stand-up comedy was a thing. Like I was just really sheltered from it. And so I found these like hole-in-the-wall shows that I would go to. And then I started hanging out with all these comics. And so then I was like, I'm going to try stand-up comedy because I'm good at that part. I'm not good at the improv part. And then I did all right. Yeah. It's working out so far, I guess.
I like how you said that because people don't have like an understanding of money. Like, because when I grew up, it's like if you recognize something, you're like, oh, that person made a lot of money. Mm-hmm. Oh, that paid, like, you know, you hear somebody on the radio and you're like, oh, they must make a lot of money. And people don't realize like the radio station I'm on is 100% volunteers. So like you should donate to Converge Radio because like it's literally people exclusively trying to do cool things in our city and not yours, but my city. My city, how cool am I? You
kind of are. You own the skateboard shop. I agree.
Okay. Well, but people have this like weird idea that you just must make a ton of money, which really isn't true, you know? But you kind of have to have all these separate things. So I was going to ask you that because I feel like stand-up comedy, obviously, unless you're playing like big time shows, which we'll get to that part of the pandemic, like shows don't exist. Yeah. What was at that point in time, what was your kind of income stream then? And we're talking about like a big time frame, right? Because you did the reality shows when you were like early 20s, right? So then you did stand-up comedy for what, 10 years or something? Like
it's been like 7. I started for a little bit in my like at 28.
Oh, okay. So
yeah.
So that whole time frame, obviously like things started growing, but before the pandemic hit anyways, what was your income stream like? Was it like 90% from stand-up comedy, or are you working other jobs? Were you doing some acting roles? Like kind of where'd you make your money? What jobs were you doing?
Before the pandemic, right before the pandemic was right when it was like, I think I can do this without a side job. And then the pandemic hit. But for a lot of times I've been making my money bartending, just bartending job. Worked at a sports bar for a long time. Then I worked at a Korean nightclub right before. That was the last bar job I had. I did work a little bar job during the pandemic, which got me COVID, which is cool. But bartending. I do voiceovers.
What'd you do voiceovers for?
Do you know, I haven't done it in a while for this restaurant, but Norm's Restaurants. No. The diner, it's like Southern California.
Oh, sure.
That was actually my first like big job, first big like commercial job. I went in for this audition for Norm's Restaurant. So, do you have Denny's in Wisconsin? Mm-hmm. Okay, so it's like a Southern California Denny's, right? Okay. And so I go in for this audition and it's for this like little role where it's like a $300 a day role, right? It's buyout, it's non-union, but the director won't let me leave. And not in like a sketchy way, but in like okay, well, do you mind staying one more? I'm going to have you read this different role with the next guy that comes in. And after like 2 hours, I was like, hey bro, I got to go. Like I got stuff to do. Like this is not a big job. And he was like, I finally figured out what I like about you. Because it's like, he was just like, this whole time I've been trying to pinpoint what it is that I like about you. And he was like, it's your voice. And he was one of the first people that put Demi Moore on tape with her voice, the raspiness. And I was a hardcore smoker at the time too, so I was a little bit more raspy. I'm still pretty raspy, but and he was like, I like your voice. Do you mind reading this on the little like label or whatever? And I was like, okay. And then like 3 days later, my agent called and was like, you booked the Norm's job. And it was so scary because they like assumed I knew what the hell I was doing.
Right.
And so I show up to this big studio in Santa Monica where it's like, they have the coffee bar, the person that comes in and takes your orders. And I was so new. And it was just like the whole time I see the words "be cool, Kral" to myself 45 times a day. Like anytime I'm in those situations where like, you're just like, be cool, Kral, you belong here. It's cool. Cause like, the imposter syndrome or whatever. And so I go into this big studio. The guy Holland, who Holland and Paige were a couple that like ran the Norms commercials for years, and I did it with them for years. I mentioned them by name because they were just so lovely and they became friends of mine. And they hand me the script, and we go in this little studio, and then they hit play and hit record, and then like the background music of the commercials on as I'm supposed to be reading along with the tempo, but I've never done this before. And I don't know and I'm sweating, I'm struggling. And then they were like, why don't we take a break? And I was like, oh my God, I'm going to get fired. They're never. And so they were like, I think we figured out what we're going to do. We're not going to do any of the music. Paige is going to say each word, each line to you one by one. And then you're going to say the line into the microphone. And they walked me through the whole thing. And it was a wonderful experience. And then I left. And then 6 months later, they were like, we want to book you for the next campaign. So they booked me for the campaigns for the next, I want to say 3 years or so. And then they booked me for King's Pancakes in King's in Pennsylvania. There's a commercial that's running in Pennsylvania that has my voice for King's, which is also like a Denny's. And so that's like where those were like my first big jobs so I got voiceover stuff, bartending. Sometimes you stand at the Lakers stadium and ask people if they want timeshares. Like there's so many odd jobs that you do that you just have to cause you're right. Like, it's like people look at me like from home, especially like I'll go home, Denver, and one of the last times I was home, we were out with my cousins and the bills kept coming and I kept paying. And finally I was like, guys, I'm not going to pay for everything all night. And they're like, well, you live in Hollywood. You can afford it. And I'm like, because I live in Hollywood, I can't afford it. And so it's just like, I think the image of people that work here is that we are like, what TV tells you.
Yeah.
I mean, Theo from The Cosby Show, which is a weird reference, I know.
Right.
Like 5 years ago, it came out that he had a job at Trader Joe's and everyone was like, oh my God. It was like, well, people have to pay the bills. And sometimes...
Yeah, they just don't understand. And I'm not going to get into politics, so we don't need to even continue this part of what I'm going to say. But people don't understand that the wage gap is massive. It's not the actors typically who make a ton of money off of these things. It's the other people you don't even see. And it's not they don't distribute the wealth very evenly. Therefore, even if you were on it, unless you were a big name, you probably didn't even make a lot of money. Even if people saw the thing a lot, if you weren't famous before that, you signed the contract for not a lot of money. So it's like there just isn't that much. So I'm wondering about how this worked for you, because I know I talked to like Wayne and he kind of switched to doing virtual shows and like that really worked out for him. But the COVID really affected everyone differently. Obviously, your health was affected. Mm-hmm. For me, I was just like shut down, couldn't get any kind of loans for anything. I just kind of lost a lot of money, and that just kind of what, is what it is. However, the real estate's like stupid cheap where I live in comparison. Mm-hmm. So like I could kind of just coast on savings for a little bit and it's like didn't ruin me. Like I'm fine.
Yeah.
Also, you got to put me in contact. I think I have a great voice for doing voiceovers, and I want to do some. I don't care what it's for. I want to do some. Oh, random side note too about commercials. Mm-hmm. Our local bank in town, and they did this forever. They always pick like real estate agents or whatever, and they're like, I bank with blah, 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 because of whatever. Yeah. So they used me because I have a lot of tattoos.
Yeah,
so I was on the back of like everyone's bills, like their bill statements. And I was at a gas station once, and I'm like filling up my gas tank, and I hear my voice, and I'm like, what? And I like look over, and I was the ad campaign that they were running on like the gas station pumps. And the funny thing is, when they selected me to do that, I was like one of two two business owners. My next door neighbor also did it. The person who was in charge of that, they downsized and got rid of his position. So they just didn't pick new ad campaigns. So they just ran mine for like ever, like 3-4 years. They just kept running the same thing. And the funny thing was, it was about skateboarding. Well, I've been fundraising for a new skate park forever. Then when I reached out to them to donate to the skate park, they said no. And I'm like, yeah.
But you signed a thing that was like,
I didn't get paid for it. I was just like, and it's visibility, I guess, whatever. But it's just like, so I did I was in commercials for like a good minute. I just didn't make any money on it. So when the pandemic hit, how did you pay your bills? Because obviously you don't start a podcast and then just have thousands of dollars roll through. Like, what did you do? Did you coast on savings like I did for a while? Or like what happened?
I was on unemployment. As I said, I was bartending before, right? Like probably like 4 months before the pandemic, I was able to stop and be like, okay, I'm making enough on all this other stuff. So I'll do unemployment. So it's like, just in case, like as a thing, whatever. And then I was on unemployment. So I was lucky that in 2019, I bartended enough that I got the unemployment for that. So it was just like, in the first couple of weeks, it was like, okay, we'll just, it was supposed to be like 2 weeks, right? So it was just like, all right, well, I'll just get this unemployment for 2 weeks and then we'll get back to the world. And then it was like, okay, it's going to be a month. And then my buddy who runs a really awesome show in Thousand Oaks that I was set to headline for the first time April 3rd, 2020, like 2 weeks before the lockdown. And so he runs this awesome, it's the first show I ever did that I walked away going, I'm a stand-up comedian. Like the first moment I had that where I was like, I'm a comedian. And so he was like, he calls me and he goes, what are you going to do? Like artistically, what are you going to do during this? And I had started this thing that I'm probably going to put on TikTok. So if you want to see it, I've been told it's great for TikTok. So I'm probably going to put it up there. I had never seen The Walking Dead before.
Why?
I don't know. I watched that one episode about the governor who kept his dead daughter alive and no one would kill him with a boyfriend.
But that was way down the line. When this thing came, okay.
Well, so I saw that in 2013 when it was airing live with a boyfriend at the time who really wanted me to get into this show. And this is going to make me sound like a sociopath. And maybe I am. I don't know. But I'm watching and I'm like, so that guy is killing a lot of people? And he's like, yeah. And I'm like, and he has his zombie daughter in the basement. Spoiler alert. It's not because it was 10 years ago at this point. And he's like, yeah. And I'm like, why is no one just killing him? And he goes, well, what do you mean? I'm like, they all have guns. Just shoot him and then you get to be the leader. And he's like, you wouldn't do that. I'm like, no hesitation. If you're in that kind of world, you either are the one who's killing people or you're the one that's getting killed. That's it. And so it annoyed me so much that I was like, I'm not going to watch this stupid show with you. So when the pandemic hit, I was like, I will give this a whirl. So I started doing these Instagram stories of just how blown away I was by everything that was happening. And so it's like, so my buddy texts me or calls me. He's like, what are you going to do artistically? And I was like, I don't know, man. And he goes, well, I think you should start a podcast. And I was like, oh, I don't want to do that. And I had a radio show at Dash. Dash Radio is a big online platform. I had a radio show there that was on hold for a little bit until we could figure out the pandemic, right? And so I wasn't doing that. And then he was just like, well, you're really great on that show. So why don't you just do like kind of a Bill Burr style in your own apartment, just, yelling about whatever. And he's like, kind of like you did with those weird Walking Dead videos. I don't know, they were a hit. People that I didn't know were reaching out and being like, you are so funny. I guess I made fun of the kids a lot. I don't know, whatever. And so I was like, all right, I guess. And then I was like, Kral Space. I asked the internet, would you listen if I did a podcast? And the internet was like, yeah. And then I was like, what should I call it? And then a lot of people had, and my buddy Dave Neal was like, Kral Space. And then I recorded my first 3 episodes and then it just sort of morphed into so that's how I kept busy in the pandemic. And then I was on unemployment for a while. And then the Zoom shows, I did a few of them, but they weren't my...
You can't read a room, right? You can't interact with it.
No,
it's like just totally different.
And it's like a guy in his living room, just like deadpan staring at you. And you're just like, this is so... And then it just basically ended up me being yelling about weird stuff I did in my apartment alone. And it was just more it translated more sad than it does on stage. Like on stage, it's like kind of funny, but if you're just like alone in your apartment, kind of sweating, talking about how it's just you and your cats, like everyone was just like, oh man. I did a Zoom show, I don't know, a month ago, and afterwards an audience member out loud said, that was a lot to process. I was like, yeah, that's probably going to be the name of my first album. That is a lot to process. And so I did a couple of them, but they weren't. And then unemployment was like running out. And I was like, do I have to get a real job? But like, Hollywood was shut down. Every way I made money was shut down. We don't need to get into politics, but our politicians were, debating if we deserved any money for help or whatever, right? The PP, all those loans. And an old boss of mine called and was like, what are you up to? And I was like, I think I need a job. And he was like, cool, I want to hire you at my bar. And I'm like, I don't know. That was 10 years ago that I worked for you. And then I worked at this sports bar for a little bit.
And that's when you got COVID.
And that's when I got COVID.
Makes sense.
Yeah. They were laxed on the COVID regulations. They were the reason why bars had to shut down, because they were the type of bar that didn't. Yeah.
We won't get into politics, but people either believe it or don't, or whatever. So the podcast. So you must have started. What was like the general date range? You remember the month? Yeah,
it was April. It was the beginning of April.
Of this
2020. Yeah.
Oh, gotcha. So I'm more of a vet than you.
Yeah.
Sick.
But I did do a radio show for 2 years before that.
So where's the podcast at right now? Like, how deep in it are you? Is it like a pretty big part of what you do at this point? Or like,
yeah, I'm trying to grow it. Like live shows are coming back.
Right. So are you booked for some live shows then?
No, not yet. I'm hesitant about getting back out there. I did a couple of live shows in the pandemic when it was safe. Like when the numbers were down in LA, I did a couple of live outdoor shows. My first one, so when you are on a show, you can generally see the lineup and kind of figure, like if you've been doing it long enough, I've produced shows, so I can kind of see where I was going to be on the lineup. And 2 were national headliners who had been on TV. One was the same level as I was. So there were 4 comics and a host, right? This is the first show I did mid-pandemic live.
Right.
And so I was like, all right, well, I'm either going to bite the bullet, meaning I'll go first, or I'll go after this guy who's on the same level as I am, and we'll probably both do 7 minutes. And then the 2 headliners will probably do 30, right? Okay, so I get there early, and I go up to the host, and she shows me the lineup, and I'm first. And I was like, okay, cool. How many minutes am I going to do? And she's like, 20. Everyone's going to do 20. And I was like...
But you only had 7 prepared.
No, I mean, I'm not that, I can do 20, I can do 5. I'm working on that work ethic of mine that I need to be more like a tight 3, a tight 20. I'm more off the cuff. Like I'm funnier if I'm like, I have a loose set, but like,
sure.
I'm not like dun, 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 like, but I understand, you know what I mean? So
yeah.
I wasn't worried about that, but I hadn't done comedy in almost like 9 months, right? So it was just like, or 6 months or whatever. So I was like, okay. And I was trying to be cool. And then in walks everybody else. And it was great because the 2 national headliners and the other guy, they were like, 20? We thought we were going to do like 10. All of us thought we were going to do 10. And so we're in the back. She's on stage and we're like, maybe we feel bad asking her if we can do less time. And I'm like, well, I'm cool doing less time, but I'm going up now. So tell her, like, they were like, what do you want to do? And we're like, we all want to do 10. Which sucks for her, right? But she's so cool, but we're all like, we only want to do 10. And it was like, all right. So I was like, if she agrees to that, light me at 8. If she doesn't agree to that, light me at 15, right? So like the light is where you get the light to know how much time you have left, right?
Sure.
And so I walk up there and I pick up the microphone and 10 seconds in, I got my first laugh and I was home. I was just home and then she lights me and I go, oh, it's already 20. And she goes, no, I lit you at 8, but do the 20. And in my mind, I was like, am I going to fuck everybody back there? Cause they don't want to do 20, but I'm going to do 20. And I did 20. And then I come back and like in the back room are 2 comics that one of them is like a comedian idol of mine, but he's also a good friend.
Sure.
And he was like, dude, you set the tone for the whole stage or the whole show. Because if you would have choked or would have only done 10, everybody would have only done 10. But because you did well and you set the room up, like, and so I was like, I'm back. And then I did a couple of other shows, one with that guy and then one at a pool in a house somewhere, which was fun, but weird.
Sure.
And so my hesitation of going back, I don't know how to put this in words. I don't know if you can relate, but like I changed so much in this last year, like on every single possible level I could have, like I really took this year to not only build a podcast, but just kind of find out who I am and find, find out my, what I want and where I want to go. And it feels like, at least in the stand-up world, at least on the level that I am, I don't think these like national headliner guys who have been able to do clubs the whole time, those guys probably don't feel this way, but it just feels like the world stopped and now it's back, and it's just back to the, look how many shows I'm doing, look how great I'm doing, look at my social media, look at this. And it's just like, oh, he bumped me. It's like the rat race politics is back. And it's, before you were used to it because it happened all the time, every day. But now we took this year pause and it's just like, oh God, am I ready to go back to the like, I'm hanging out with some comics, they're talking about each other. Like, yeah, that guy got bumped for that guy. He's not even that funny. And I'm just like, I want to do comedy, but I don't know.
That's crazy. No, I don't experience it because I'm so off in my own little world. And that's what I love. Because really, when I came out here, and like right now, we're hanging out in a penthouse in Hollywood and it's dope. Don't get me wrong. And I'm super appreciative to be here, super appreciative to meet you and like do all this cool shit. But like, there's no way I could live here. There's just absolutely no way, because people go a million miles an hour. Like, and I was talking to somebody and she was from New York. She's like, people are slow here. I'm like, well, okay, for me, it's like a million miles an hour. And when we were in our own like little serene space, all of a sudden our friendship groups like became a lot tighter and closer. You really like saw who was actually close and cared about you because it was no longer convenient to hang out, right?
Yeah.
So like you either FaceTime with people or you had your small group or whatever, but you kind of came back into your own little space. And a lot of people spend some time, whether it's meditating, like actually sitting there like with their eyes closed, or picking up activities where there's solitude and there's still meditation. But people came to this like serene space within themselves that I can see why it would be really difficult to then like just be thrown back into like the hectic part. Because right, when you sit in those positions like that, you kind of rethink your life, right? Because you have time to do that. And you're like, okay, well, is this really what I want to be doing all the time? And you forget how enjoyable it is to be by yourself and actually have that time. You forget how much you need that because you haven't had it. It's just like not part of your life. Then all of a sudden when that is your life, it's like, oh, okay, well now what exactly do I want to do? Do I want to be like rat race forever again or not? So I can, but it definitely has been totally different for me. I will say though that I record my show in seasons. So like you're the first of 3 people I'm interviewing today, which is like kind of crazy. But I get that, I get a little bit nervous before my first interview of a season because it'll be a month or 2 months or like however long since the last time I was on a mic. And I'm like, okay, cool. Hopefully this is going to go well. And like yesterday I show up to David Knava's house or to his studio, and I sit down and I'm like, here we go, record. And as I'm doing my intro, I'm like, oh yeah, like I'm good to go. And I love that you had that moment with the comedy thing, right? I think I hope everybody has that moment, because I remember my moment was with Wayne. I keep shouting him out, but dude's the homie. But Wayne was the first, like, I don't know if you want to call him a big name or whatever, but he was the first like really successful person in his like genre that I didn't have a connection to at all. I really didn't know him at all, like going into the interview. So I'm driving up, and I had to drive like an hour and a half or something to where he was at. And I'm driving up and I'm like, cool, like I'm prepared for this interview. I've watched a bunch of stuff about him and whatever. And he was the first one of the season too, so it had been a little bit. And I was like, hopefully this goes well. And I thought that I would be really nervous. I really did. And I show up to his house or whatever, and his fiance is like outside, or girlfriend, I think it's fiance. And she thought I was like the dude coming to fix their solar panels.
Oh no.
but anyway, so she introduced me to Wayne, and I talked to him, and the second I get on the mic, I'm like, whoa, I'm super comfortable. I'm not nervous at all with this. Do the whole interview. It's like probably my favorite interview. And I remember when I was driving back to the Airbnb I was at in Florida, I was just like on this high. I was so elated because I'm like, I'm meant to do this. Like I feel so good. This is what I should be doing. And I'm like, all right, how do I get a hold of LeBron? I'm like, I can interview anybody now, but I like finally like set in, and I'm like, I can do this. And now I feel so comfortable because I talk to people and they're like, oh, you're going out to LA to interview these people? Like, how'd you get a hold of this person or that person? I'm like, well, for one, people are just people. And if you know a friend of theirs and they like what you do and they have any amount of free time, in quarantine, people had free time.
Yeah,
they link you up with
yes.
it. Right. And I'm like, I just developed this skill somehow where I'm just like pretty comfortable talking to people. Anyways, things are going back to normal to a certain degree, I mean, whatever normal looks like, shows are coming up and all that type of stuff. What, like, what are your days going to look like? Obviously Kral Space isn't going anywhere. You're going to go back to doing stand up. Did you take another bartending job? Like what are your days going to look like?
I can't bartend now. I like physically I'm one of the long haul COVID people. So I like physically can't do that job, which I think is the universe, not to get all like woo-hooey or whatever, but I think the universe is like, you've had one foot in the door on this thing for years, just scared. You know what? Because it is scary. Like I live alone. I don't have a lot of family. So it's like, I'm alone in a sense. Like I have a community and a village around me, obviously, but like, so I've always had one foot in the door of all this, but like I'll bartend too, just in case so I can pay my bills, right? And I feel like now the universe is like, well, now you can't. So I'm going to kick you out into the nest and we'll see what happens. So I can't bartend, but I don't think I told you this. It's not really out there yet, but I'm releasing a book. I'm self-publishing a book. It's so scary. You
wrote this book?
Yeah, I'm right. I mean, it's in the process. It's written now. It's being edited, and then in a few weeks, I'm going to hand it out to a few friends to see if they'll read it and tell me if I'm totally crazy for thinking I can write a book. And then I'm going to release it in June, which is way too soon. But so I'm like, I'm looking at different, and I don't think this will be like $1 million project or whatever, but it will be some, like a thing that I think that I've been really proud of that I hope will do well. And so, so my days are looking like that. I'm trying to get this new agent. I'm really trying to hit the voiceover stuff hard. The voiceover stuff is weird. It's like 6 people have all the jobs, or all the people have the little $100 jobs here and there. And I'm just like, I'm just going to go hard at all this, right? I did an Instagram commercial a couple weeks ago for, God, what was it? It was like some girl vitamins, where I had to film by myself in my apartment because everything's remote. So it was just like someone like sent me a shot list. It was a nightmare, but it was a commercial and it was cool. Sure. And so it's just like all these little things that I'm like, all right, let's just throw everything we got at this and release this book. And saying that book thing out loud is really scary. It's so scary.
Makes it real.
It's real. Yeah, it's real. I've told way too many. I've hired someone to design the book cover. It's all like it's real. So it's just like, it's one of those things where you're just like, and that's kind of what I've done with everything in my career. It's just be afraid, but do it anyway. Yeah. And just like, see what happens. Right. You know, like when I moved out to LA, I talked about moving out to LA since I was a little girl. And then when I finally did it, my whole family was like, whoa, this is out of the blue. And I was like, and then a friend in high school, when I always knew you'd go to LA and I always have known you're going to be big someday. And I'm like, why? She goes, because you've always been a person that says, I'm going to do this thing. And then you go do this thing.
Sure.
And it's terrifying, but if you want to do that thing, especially this last year taught us anything, it all could just be taken away. It all could just stop. The world came to its knees. Whether if you believe it or don't believe it, it still made the world come. You know what I mean?
Oh,
so
absolutely.
It's just like, so now it's just like, if you're afraid, okay, do it anyway. Like,
yeah, you have to.
Yeah. I had a friend years ago, and I wish I had listened to him then in that sketchy phone room I told you about. All my first friends in LA I made in that weird little phone room. But I wish I understood the words that he was telling me then that now I'm finally grasping. He was like, and it's been said by a billion of people and billion different ways, but he was just like, do whatever you want to do because that guy's going to judge you no matter what. Like everyone around you going to judge you no matter what. Whatever you're doing, someone's going to hate you or make fun of you or whatever. So you might as well be made fun of and hated for doing something you love. And it's so cliche, but it's...
Well, yeah, I mean, it's the whole idea of like, who's going to be the best Kym Kral? Like literally
Kym
only you can
Kral
be.
Is, yeah.
Well, that's what I'm saying. If you wanted to be somebody else, if you want to be Eliza Schlesinger, you can't because she's that person. So like what you know what I mean? You just have to be whoever you are. It's interesting that like you're at this point in your career and now the safety net's disappearing, right? Because it's different for everybody, whatever the situation is. And when I opened my store, I didn't have a choice. Like, how do you open a retail store and be there 7 days a week and have a safety net other job? You literally like can't.
You got to throw your whole thing at it. Yeah.
Yeah. So when I was 23, I got my space, I think in January, and I worked full time for Verizon at the time. I opened in April 14th. I can't believe I might be forgetting that date. No, April 11th. See? Dang, I'm forgetting. So anyways,
it was a while ago, so be nice to yourself.
True. So for that like 3.5 months, I worked full-time at Verizon, and then I worked a 12-hour day on one of my days off at the jewelry store I used to work at. And then any time that I had, I was like prepping to open my store, and I put everything into it. And then I remember I had my last day on a Thursday, took the weekend off to like open on like a Monday. Why? But I did. So opened on a Monday, and I had no safety net. There was nothing. It was like, well, okay, I'm just doing this 100% because I have to. And it worked out, but it's like terrifying when you first do it because you're like, there's literally no stability. Money comes and goes in droves. I make the vast majority of my money literally like right now, which is why it's so stressful because like I'm paying, an employee back in Wisconsin and I'm out in LA.
Yeah.
And I have like, it's my busiest time of year, but I'm trying to do this and whatever. But I make all my money during that time frame, and then I have to sit with like no money for like a long period of time. You know what I mean? So it's like, it's definitely a stressful thing to get used to of like, okay, you got to believe that it's just going to work.
And let me ask you though, it will. Like, I believe that. I believe the people, like, I think in this town, everybody will make it. I think everybody could make it, but like, not everyone's going after it. Like someone's like, I'm a producer, and you're like, you're high and it's Tuesday afternoon. You're not a producer.
That's
but it's
it. Yeah. If you know you're going to make it, nothing's going to stop you.
Yeah.
It's that determination, and you see that with entrepreneurs. Artists are also entrepreneurs, whatever, like entertainers.
I think I'm an entrepreneur,
Absolutely
but yeah.
Yeah, totally.
It feels weird to say. Yeah.
Yeah. But you are, and that's what it is. The people who are successful are the ones that are like, it doesn't matter what happens. I'm going to figure it out. And like, I'm just going to do it,
And I've fallen and I've failed and I've looked stupid and I've taken breaks and I've laid on the ground and been like, I can't, you know what I mean? Like all of the stuff that you hear about, but it's just like, I don't have anything else I want to do. So like,
right. Well, and
this is what I'm going to do.
You have enough built up at this point now where you're like, okay, I'm obviously at least somewhat good at this. People think I'm good at this. I know I can do it now. That, you know what I mean? Rather than like right when you move out here, if, you know what I mean? When you're 19 or whatever, to be like, okay, I'm going to do this full time. A little different story. Now you have a little bit more built up where it's like, okay, I know realistically, maybe I have to put in a lot more hours than I used to for a minute, but like, I know that I can do this.
And only focus. I remember when I first moved here, I was walking, it's just so funny about like fear and like how we make things so much bigger than they are.
Yeah.
I was walking through Westwood, which is a small town by UCLA where where that one room apartment was.
Right.
And this guy comes out of his hair salon and he goes, I love your hair. Do you model? And I literally a week in LA and I was like, oh, I don't know. Yeah, I guess. And he goes, cool, come by tomorrow. This is my salon. We'll talk about the details or whatever and just come by tomorrow. I was so scared of that guy that I dressed up every day for like 3 weeks and walked by the store and then chickened out and went home. 3 weeks. And then finally, like 3 weeks in one day, I show up and I'm like, hello, you told me to come by. And the guy was like, yeah, that was like a month ago. I hired somebody. He was so, and then now that was one of the things I guess I didn't now I model my hair. I did before the world ended.
Oh, okay.
And now I'm like, I go to those castings all the time. A Cocker Spaniel could do that job. And the fact that meaning it's very easy.
Yeah.
But like the fact that it's just so funny, fear. Like I built this up that like I was so scared I wasn't good enough for this random man's hair salon. And now I'm like, I go to huge shows and runway with this stuff. It's so funny how we make things so much bigger in our heads.
Absolutely. I think that's what it is all the time. I say it a lot on the show that people get in their own way, and it's because they don't think they're capable of doing it because for whatever reason, they think it's this like huge mountain, and you're like, it's like one block of a street, dog. Like it's not that big a deal.
You got
like,
this, man.
It's very possible if you just like know it's possible. And that's another thing too, right? It's like as you accomplish a bigger thing, everything else below that is like, oh, like whatever. That's nothing, So now that you've done all this stuff, yes, it's still scary to like go 100%, but it's like you have a little bit better perspective on it where you're like, no, this is like, this is definitely within the realm of possibility. So I just got to do this. So when you do, this is my favorite part of the show, when you do something that you're really passionate about for a living, it's not like your office job, right? Office jobs, you're like a weekend warrior and you get excited because it's like, whatever small thing excites you about it, right?
Yeah.
No, oof. Yeah. This is why I make the show is like specifically to help people do things that they enjoy more with their lives, hopefully as a career. Anyways, you end up having a lot of really cool experiences. Me like sitting here with you is a pretty cool experience. What is one of your favorite experiences, something specific that you're grateful for, but only happened because you decided to do comedy and like moved out here?
Oh God. Okay. Well, my family is always like, we don't understand what you do. We don't understand what you do. You bartend and then you have this weird job here and all this stuff. And I always was just like, I have gotten to do things because I've worked with idols who call me their peers. I got to go to the Super Bowl and watch my team win Super Bowl 50. Denver Broncos will be back. Sorry. And so like I get to do all these things, but the highlight, I was asked to do a show. My friend, I'm trying to think of the first part. My friend's wife had cancer and they were going to do this benefit show. My buddy came up with Bill Burr. Do you know Bill Burr?
Yeah.
Bill Burr's.
Everyone knows him.
Yeah, my God. And my buddy came up with him, and my buddy Wayne has passed away, so rest in peace, Wayne. But Wayne was like, I'm going to put together this big comedy show, and I was like 3 years into comedy. It was a terrible comedy show. I bombed a ton. It was awful. Imagine 3 years into comedy, and every person you've ever worked with, ever, comes to the show, and Bill Burr's the headliner. It was a nightmare. But so Bill Burr's the headliner. I had horrible dreams for like weeks and weeks coming up to that, right? Like dreams where like no one was listening. It was just awful, right?
Sure.
But so I get there and my buddy Wayne is there and Bill Burr is there. And I was like, I know this is kind of dude, Bill, but can I get a selfie with you? And he goes, yeah, it's dude. What are you doing? You and I are peers. And I was like, oh my God, Bill Burr just called me his peer. And I was like, okay. He goes, well, get over here. We'll take the picture. So we take the picture and then he looks at it and he goes, you're taller than me. The least you could do is either scrunch down or be funny about it. And I was like, can we do it again? He goes, you had your chance. So then we're backstage, right? And we're like waiting to go on and stuff. And he's so cool, right? Just so cool. I've got to work with him a few times, just randomly, but he's just so, and so we're back there and I was like, I jokingly was like, how do you want me to introduce you? And he was like, it doesn't matter. Like, and I wasn't funny then, so he didn't get the joke, obviously. He was just like, I don't care. And then headliners, when you host, you want to ask, like, some were like, light me when I've been going on for 20 minutes. I don't need the light. I know how long, whatever, right? So Bill was like, I was like, when do you want the light? And he was like, these people have paid a lot of money to come here and do this show to help Michelle, the woman who has cancer, who's now in remission, is fine. I'm going to give him a show. So just let me go. Just stand by for like a 45-minute mark to come back out, but I'm going to give him a good show. So we're standing backstage and there's this like lift in the stage, like this weird, like, I don't know, thing that was somewhere. And he like kicks it and he goes, oh, it's attached. And I was like, yeah. And he goes, I'm going to fall on that. And I was like, I almost fell on it. I was like, oh my God, I'm small talking with Bill Burr. Like in my head was like, okay, just be cool. And my best friend had her baby that night. And I was like, hey, my best friend and her husband were supposed to be here, but they had their baby tonight. And I'm so excited. And I show him the picture of my best friend and her brand new baby. And he looks at it and then he looks at me and he goes, I don't know these people. I don't give a fuck about this. And I was like, this is literally everything I've ever dreamed of. And then, at the end we hugged and he was like, nice to meet you. And it was like a great experience. And then a couple drunk people were like cornering him and I got to save him and be like, oh, we're going to go take some pictures, Bill. You want to go? So like, wow. I get to work with people that I think of as idols that are just people and think of me as a peer. And like, That's Andrew. Do you know Andrew Santino? He's been in a ton of shit at this point.
Sure.
I met him on the Comedy Store. He was the first person that told me to be cool, soda pop. That's what I say to myself too. I don't know where I got that saying from, but it came apart during quarantine when I was by myself. So now and we were on the Comedy Store patio. And we were talking and I was just like, oh my God, I just have to tell you how, and I was pretty new in comedy. This was before the Bill Burr thing too. And I was like, I'm just like kind of freaking out a little bit because you're really funny and you're like kind of an idol of mine. And he looks at me and he goes, don't ever do that again. And I was like, what do you mean? And he goes, look at this patio. And it was packed. And he goes, everyone here has either been where you are or will be where you are or where I am or where people are above me. All of us are just comics. Just be a comic. We're just friends. We're just two people talking shop. And I was like, and then I ran into him, I don't know, like 2 years later at the Improv, and he was with some other guy, and I walked in and I saw him, and I was like, "There's no way that guy remembers me," and he waves me over, and I was like, "Me?" And he goes, "Yeah, get over here." And I walk over, and he's like, "Kym Kral, how are you?" And I'm like, "Oh my God!" And he goes, "Sit, let's talk." Bought me a glass of wine, and like that was the first guy that was just like gracious, but also was like, "Don't think of yourself as anything other than my peer, because that's what you are. Because I have been an open micer. I have struggled. I had all the 45 jobs. You know what I mean?
Right, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, like I said, it's crazy when you meet. I mean, I haven't yet. I guess I did. I am a fan of Casanova, this like rapper that's big in my area. And he's like the first person that I DM'd out of nowhere, like, well, maybe, you know.
Maybe he'll say yes.
Yeah, and he did. I was actually like in Seattle at the time when I got the text back, or DM back from him, and he's like, yeah, tell me more. Sent him like 2 messages, and he's like, yeah, here's my cell number, hit me up, let's plan it. So that was like the first time I sat with somebody that I'm like, whoa, I'm a fan of yours, and like interviewed him, and it was like super totally normal. But I'm like kind of waiting for that day, because like the biggest guest so far I've had was Lamorne Morris. How do you say biggest? But whatever, like he's the most famous, I suppose. But I interviewed him, and I had literally never seen anything he was in except maybe some commercials. So like. Yeah. I wasn't fanning out at all. I was just like, oh, yeah, this is really cool, and hung out with him, and then posted to my story and had a bunch of people hit me up like, oh my God, how do you know him? And I'm like, I don't know. He was just a guy. He was a super cool guy.
He's just some guy, yeah.
Just a guy. Super, yeah, that's dope. I can't wait until I have like all these, well, I already have a lot of stories now. That's the funny part. I'm like waiting for everything to really go back to normal so I can go to the bar and then name drop everyone and be like, yeah, I'm friends with this person and this person and this person. And then
name dropping is very exciting.
Then I'll be the cool guy at the bar in little Eau Claire, Wisconsin, which I love that city, so I'm not trying to downplay it. Anyways, you had a quote. I must have been reading the interview, but you had a quote which basically is like the last question I typically ask people, right? Okay. So I'll lead in. Your quote was, maybe I'm messing this up. You said, so many experiences that seemed like setbacks, in fact, taught me lessons, which led to something even better that wouldn't have happened without it. Can you pick one of those and share it?
Oh God. Okay. Yeah, you're right. You gave me this and I'm like, let's think. So many experiences. I mean, yeah, I would say losing Dash radio. That was a really big, I did Dash comedy, right?
Right.
Which was like the biggest credit I had up until that point, right? It has like 10 million views or downloads or whatever. I think we didn't have that many, but we were on a station with that. And like, you know, I mean, like huge names were coming in and out of there. A lot of rappers that I did not know, but it was in the partner that I had. The pandemic kind of took that friendship too, but it was a falling out end of the show, right? And I called the guy who runs Dash Comedy, who had who had launched a pretty prominent career, like a pretty I'll tell you, a pretty big career that everybody knows, right? So he was talking to me about the divorce he had with this guy, when this guy basically was like, I don't want you to be my manager anymore. He's one of the biggest stars in the world. I'm not saying the name just because I don't want to air businesses, but
yeah, sure.
But it was one of those things where it ended and I just was like, I can't do this alone. And I'm on the phone with this comedy manager has become one of my dearest friends, and he's wonderful, and he's been one of my biggest cheerleaders. And I was like, I want my own show. And he goes, that's it right there. That's all I was waiting for. Let's do this. And it was like, but such a heartbreak. And he was just like, mourn this breakup, because this is a 2-year show that you interviewed people that you wouldn't know, you know what I mean? Like, and it was a setback. But I wouldn't have, and I know Kral Space is brand new and it's little and it's small, but I have this vision for it. And I have what I want it to be, which is so much more than what the Kym and Ken show was. And if it weren't for that massive heartbreak, I would never have gone on this path where I'm now building a brand that I didn't do before the pandemic, which is like, not only being funny, but talking about really hard stuff and making it normal, taking the stigma out of sexual abuse or depression or all that stuff, and like talk about this so we can maybe get people help. And I wouldn't have gone in that direction had I stayed with this other show.
Yeah, well, it's funny. People don't realize like where the stepping stones are. They think that maybe something's a loss, but it isn't. You probably wouldn't have had the confidence to do something like Kral Space and talk about the things and have this kind of vision for what it is if you hadn't been doing that other show. You know what I mean? Like it led you right into that. And like that's even with my show. Like I wouldn't have understood how to build a business such as the show if I didn't own my skateboard shop. You know what I mean? It's like all these things are stepping stones that help you with it. Well, thank you so much for walking out here with your mace and making sure that I wasn't a weirdo.
I definitely have mace in my purse. Yes.
You're the best. Do you have any other last words? Any other things you want to mention or throw out there, or shout outs or friends that you want to say what's up to or whatever before we end the show?
Oh my God, who do I want to say? I'm frozen again. I don't know. I would love it if everybody took a listen to Kral Space. I'm really proud of it. I love people in Minneapolis, so I may come to Eau Claire.
Yeah, Eau Claire is real close to Minneapolis. Otherwise, we can come out there.
I might do some shows in Minneapolis when the world comes back. So I would love that. And yeah, follow me on everything and get my book when it comes out in June. I'm like, push it to July. I'm like, no, push yourself. I don't know. But yeah, so
yeah. So when people are like, okay, Kym's the best and they want to support you, the best way is just follow you, buy the book.
Follow me, buy the book, subscribe to my podcast. If you want to do the Patreon, I have bonus episodes. I have a weird thing about me that I believe that Paul McCartney died in 1966. So I did a whole, it's the one weird thing about me, which is a weird thing to drop at the very end of your show. And you're like, what? It ends conversations. People think I'm out of my mind. Yeah, so I did a bonus episode where I tell you all of my proof why I think that Billy Shears is the Paul McCartney that we know now. So if you want to subscribe to my Patreon, you can also see my stand-up. You can see bonus episodes and buy my book. Follow me, all the normal artist stuff.
Thank you for joining us for this episode of The Passion Pod. We hope you enjoyed it as much as we did. We'll see you soon.